Okay. Ohio political news coming at you live and in person. All right, it's a podcast show here tonight, and boy, what are we going to do tonight? We are going to talk property taxes, and you know what else? We're going to talk property taxes. Got a lot of that going on. Brian is with us here tonight. Good to see you, Brian. Jonathan made the trip.
Thank you.
Good to see you. We got some special guests here tonight. Here's one of them. This is Lake County Auditor Chris Galloway. And thank you, Chris, for being a part of it. And I also want to say hello to David Thomas, who is hiding out somewhere in some suspicious location. He won't tell us where, though. But he's out there. He's out there. We will find out. Okay. So you
forgot the other commish.
Oh. How could I do that? John Poleshnik, the one, the only. Okay, I forgot. We've got more talent than we can handle on this show tonight. What we're going to do is I've got so many questions from people that want to know things about property taxes, and I thought instead of us getting into some long discussion, I'm going to read these questions, and then, boom, we're just going to go with the lightning round, give me a 1-minute answer, and if somebody else wants to chime in on that same question, same rules. Give me a 1-minute answer. And then when we're done with this, we'll come back and we'll talk more in-depth and longer discussions on things. Okay?
Yeah, for a little bit.
All right, let's see what we got here.
You're a little late.
What's
Is that Leonard? Is Leonard with us?
That sounds like Leonard's joining us.
Hey, there he is.
Gilbert,
Leonard,
move your camera down.
Did you hear the
look
rules?
like Kilroy. You could have put some knuckles up there, but Kilroy was here. You can only see the top. There we go.
There you go. That's better.
I'm just listening in. That's all.
Okay, well, you can chime in if you like. It's a lightning round. We're going to get hopping, and we want to try to keep answers to 1 minute during the lightning round. All right. Let's get this show on the road. Let's see what we got here. Okay. So these are all actual questions. Here's the first one. It says we have a lottery that has, here's an idea, they said. Come up with a lottery for a $100,000 prize and use the rest of the money to fund the schools, the police, the fire services, and stuff like that. All right, who wants to tackle that question? Did it make sense?
I mean, I'll do it now.
I think that makes sense, but I mean, that question has already been tackled. If you want to start with me, I'll tell you that I'm old enough to remember when the Ohio lottery rolled out and everyone was like, there's going to be so much revenue flowing into the state of Ohio. We're going to fund our public school education system indefinitely. There's just going to be so much money. We're going to be flooded with cash. And look where that got us. It's sure some more money went into the school district, but it went into ABE, anything but education. It goes toward anything except the one job that they have in our government-run schools, and that's the pursuit of academic excellence. So any talk about adding more revenue from lottery is pure fiction and nonsense. They already have too much money. They're flush with money. They have $10 billion they're sitting on, and giving them more money out of lottery isn't going to get us anywhere. The quality of education has decreased with funding. I say let's stop talking about giving more and more and more and more money to our government-run K-12 education system.
I'm going to ask Chris. Chris, do you want to chime in on this one as well? And if not, fine, I'll throw it to somebody else. But, you know, the lottery, where's all that money going? Any idea? And why isn't it funding the schools?
The problem is, of course, the public was oversold on the lottery and what it would do ultimately when it was launched. So you talk about a $100,000 prize, there's millions of dollars of prizes that people are buying lottery tickets for annually, raising a lot of money. I'm sure Dave has specific numbers on that, but in terms of the overall cost as it exists currently, it's not paying for education in its entirety, and one more lottery isn't going to do that. One more game, one more, strange gambling element isn't going to get it done.
Yeah, I can share real quick. Here's some crazy numbers for you. So the current lottery, and Chris is absolutely right, and so is Jonathan, far oversold in terms of what the impact would be. Current lottery brings in roughly $1.5 billion every year. That money does go towards our K through 12 education, but it's actually a spending total problem. 1.5 billion in revenue from the lottery. Total spend for public education K through 12 is right about $30 billion. So it's about 1/30 of the actual expense. So to cover what we need to cover in terms of revenue from the lottery, it's just not quite there. That money's going there, but it's just a small portion of the overall actual spend.
All righty, let's move on to another question here. And if you're in the chat, you can start chatting. We will start taking chat questions too. These are questions I got off of Facebook, though. Okay, abolishing property taxes. This could open the door to other issues. This is something I hadn't thought of. It says like big investment firms buying up everything that they can. Is that something to worry about? Is that even an issue? Let me throw it to you, Brian.
I don't quite understand that. I mean, I don't think the property taxes, if you're talking about BlackRock coming in and buying up all the land, they're going to buy it whether or not you have property taxes or not. And I don't know if BlackRock is buying up actual homes in Ohio. I'd like somebody to confirm that for me. So I've heard that question posed before, but I don't see that as a problem.
I'm tracking it.
You want to say something, Jonathan? Go
You're
ahead.
right, Brian.
Yeah, I'm sorry to step in here, but that's right in my wheelhouse. That's the sort of thing that I've been tracking for a long time now. And here's the way that I look at it. I've been approached with this question before, and I think it's a valid one, at least on its face. But to think that BlackRock, Blackstone, State Street, Vanguard, and others are somehow going to buy more or less residential property based on the potential absence of property taxes is pure fiction. Asking BlackRock or Blackstone or one of those types of companies to pay property taxes is the equivalent of somebody asking us to reach in our pocket and pull out $1. It is a tiny, tiny number compared to these firms. So there's a little bit of complexity to this. I can't get it all into a minute, but what is happening, and there are some states where the institutional ownership of residential single family homes is approaching 30%. Ohio's not there yet, but we do see activity from BlackRock and companies like them buying up real estate. And essentially what that looks like is they're coming in and overbidding. They're offering 120 or 130% of value, which is catastrophic to we the people. It prices us out of home ownership. It also drives up the estimated property values, which then increases our taxes artificially. So we're paying taxes on fictional numbers that are driven up by these institutional buyers. Whether or not property tax fits into this part of the conversation is kind of misleading, because we're talking the property tax side of it is such small numbers in the realm of home buying and real estate purchases that it's chump change to companies like BlackRock.
Okay, gotcha. So you don't think it
Joe,
really would matter much?
Joe, can I jump on this one too?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Get you on there. Go ahead.
Asking the question, should we relent from abolishing property taxes because it'll make homes more attractive to investors is like asking, should we hold back from curing cancer because it will cost revenues to hospitals? It's somewhat absurd. Of course, abolishing property taxes, cutting any taxes, makes Ohio's economy more appealing to investors, residents, and businesses alike. That's a good thing. And we shouldn't be afraid to welcome new investment, new residents, new dollars into the state. So yeah, it will make owning property in Ohio more attractive. That's a good thing.
I don't know that I agree on
That's
the
a good point,
institutional
John.
side. And frankly, I'd love to see us do something to dissuade institutional purchase of residential properties. I don't think that BlackRock has any business buying up single-family homes or multifamily for that matter, and certainly not farming. That is the realm and should be the exclusive purview of families, not institutions.
All right.
Jonathan, it's
Dead on, Jonathan.
there's
Yeah, go ahead.
one of the things that the Auditors Association and Dave's been a part of this in terms of legislative is, the discussion of eliminating the non-business credits and upping home owner occupied credit on your tax bills. It's been an area that we've been focused on as an Auditors Association, trying to dissuade all the things that Jonathan outlined in his comments, the institutional buyers, the out-of-state buyers, buying up a lot of property, driving up prices because they're paying cash on the barrelhead at 20% over asking, making it harder for locals to be able to buy a home, and then therefore, of course, driving up this spiraling up of values. One of the things, and again, admittedly, it's kind of small, but it's a start. It would be to eliminate that credit for those businesses, those investors, and then increase the owner occupied credit so that you get the credit, you get more of a credit when you're a homeowner who lives in their home versus someone getting a credit when they don't even live in the state and it's just investment property.
Right. We're actually right now subsidizing BlackRock to purchase homes, which is the completely opposite type of policy we should be doing. The key, though, is we're also not trying to harm your mom and pop landlords as well. So we're still trying to separate those and see legally how we can do it. But yeah, Chris and Jonathan, spot on.
All right, very good, guys. Very good. I'm going to move on to the next question. I'm going to direct this to Brian and then anybody else who wants to chomp in on it, okay? It says, this person is saying that we have no plan to replace the property tax, and they want some kind of a real answer. What do you say?
Yeah, Joe, we get that. That's probably the first question we say. Well, how are you going to fund schools, and how are you going to pay for police, fire, roads and bridges, and that sort of thing? And initially, everybody wants to say, well, we're going to replace dollar for dollar on the funding of the schools, and we say that's really the wrong question. Because what we would like to do is we now want to take a look at the actual spending side. The state of Ohio does not have a problem in generating revenue. We have a spending problem. So we've been saying for quite some time, do we need 611 school districts in the state of Ohio? We've got 9 here in Lake County. And what if we had a county school district with one superintendent, one curriculum director, and without the property taxes? I dare say we're going to have a severe downsizing of what we need of government, because I don't believe that the government role is to be in the valuation of properties. And I would like to see them get out of that business. And then we're also going to say, do we need auditors and treasurers? Maybe we need to restructure, all of government because they shouldn't be in the business of valuing property.
I'm going to throw this over to the commissioner here. Go ahead, John.
The solution to government spending is not more spending, more borrowing, and more taxes. It's cutting spending. And fundamentally, the way you fund the delta between property taxes and a world without them is you cut government spending. There are really 3 different ways to do that. Once again, we can live in a world where we do nothing. Property taxes continue to go up with inflation and seniors get taxed out of their homes. Possibility 2, we've heard a lot of politicians talk about this. We cut essential services like roads, police, or fire, and we all get an off-road motorcycle and become our own police force. Don't think that's too wise. Door number 3, we cut spending. And as Brian said, a big opportunity for that is by combining school districts, but we also have to look at the state budget, because ultimately we have the biggest state budget we've ever had in Ohio history, and it's the biggest budget there is to cut from. We don't want to cut local services, so say the voters, and we don't want to keep paying higher taxes. Door number 3 is the only option.
Excellent. Okay, very good. Let me just throw it over one more to Chris Galloway. Since you are an auditor, just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think, first of all, it's a valid question, and it's one that, I flagged for Brian and his team when they first met with me when they launched their signature drive, which was the biggest challenge you'll ultimately have in convincing voters is there has to be an alternative on the other side, right? We can all say, cut this, do that, but people are going to know how that math is going to work in order to secure, if you're looking to secure their vote to abolish property taxes. So in that sense, it's a perfectly valid question. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know what the state of Ohio would do if the amendment were to pass. I've seen a lot of different numbers in terms of what the revenue that would have to be from sales tax and fees and income tax might have to look like. And I agree with Brian and Commissioner Pleshnik that a big portion of it would have to be cutting the size and scope of government and finding ways to deliver the services that the public wants in a more cost-effective and efficient manner. Now, if property taxes are raising $23.2-ish billion a year in Ohio, and you cut 30% through tremendous slashing of services and everything, you're still looking at like $16 billion that for basics like fire and police and other things that have to be paid for. And don't forget, in all those budgets, around 70% of all those budgets is the human cost, the labor. That's the actual firemen, the actual policemen, the actual teachers. So I don't know what that would look like, and I don't know that anyone has yet sort of figured that out. If it were to pass, that's going to ultimately fall in David's lap to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, Dave, you got to come up with a solution, man. We're counting on it. Let's do it, and I want to hear it point by point. Go ahead.
Yeah, so obviously next year I think we'll be doing a lot of conversations in the legislature about what this could look like. There are actually some really good opportunities to do exactly that, to kind of right size the size of government. But I always remind folks the roadmap in a sense is already here. We see a lot of local governments doing creative things that aren't relying on the property owner. So, for example, I was just in Washington County last week. Their county commissioners fund part of their townships through the sales tax. Over in Montgomery County, instead of having property taxes fund the children's services or senior services, for example, it's part of the sales tax. In Medina County, they actually use a decent chunk of the sales tax to help fund the schools and school buildings. So we're kind of seeing this, the ability to have a variety of ways and roadmaps now. But the key is, I think, making sure that those essential services are still there, which the average voter knows. You vote yes, you're not going to get rid of your police and fire and your roads. Those will still be there, just paid for in a different way.
All right. Very good. Let's go on to another question here. This one's kind of interesting.
Joe.
I hadn't, Jonathan.
Wait. Before you move on, let me chime in here.
Go ahead.
Since we have three esteemed speakers on this program from Lake County, let's focus on Lake County, Ohio. And you, my listener friends, are welcome to do the same exercise in whatever county you're in. Look up a couple of school districts. I'm looking at the Ohio Department of Education website. And according to ODE, Ohio Department of Education, $30,476 per pupil was recently spent in Wickliffe. Wickliffe is a school district in Lake County. There are some people that want to qualify that number because there are certain expenses that were one time or they're only every 3 years, etc. But that's a representative example of the type of money that's being spent. And since schools on average represent about 60% of the outlay of our property taxes, schools have to be under the magnifying glass. And when we have school districts, that's far from the worst. They're much worse than that. You look at Akron, Dayton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, and many, many other districts like them, and we have some over $40,000 per pupil. By the way, Wickliffe, in case anybody's wondering, what happens in return for that $30,000. That's actually not the complete number. It's probably more like $35,000 per pupil. If you're wondering what you get in return for that, that's a reported almost about a 50% proficiency rate. Keep in mind, of course, that proficiency standards in Ohio have been softened recently. At the state level, recently in 2019, our total state budget was $67 billion. We're now over $100 billion. In a few short years, we have increased the spend preposterously. And all we have to talk about doing is just simply getting back to, I thought 67 billion was unreasonable. And if for anybody that's interested, you can look at other countries and what they're doing for education. They spend a fraction of what we do and experience better results. That has to be our starting point. If we can stop the flood of people going homeless that are threatened to lose their homes because of the taxation, 30% increase in property taxes, and at the same time better address proper education for the next generation, I believe that both are simultaneously infinitely doable, but we have to put our lens on it.
Yeah, Jonathan is right on that, Joe. I'd like to add in and I know Representative Thomas has been working on this, but this 20 mil floor for the school districts is really immoral, and something needs to be done. For example, Willoughby East Lake School District in the last revaluation got $8.8 million without a vote of the taxpayers. And when you just think about that, 611 school districts, I think more than 50% are at that 20 mil floor. They're trying to address that, but it's still, as Jonathan says, why would you keep funding a public school system that is producing the results of less than 50% proficiency? Well, less than 50%.
And on the state side, if we look at actual state taxpayers, I always like to remind folks it's not just the property owner who's paying for our school systems. More is never enough, is what I usually say, because our budget in 2020 increased state funding for schools almost $2 billion. Budget 2022, almost $1 billion. This budget here, almost $750 million. So we keep putting more money into the system, and it's unfortunately, I joke with folks, I don't know if you really want to trust Columbus to hold the line in terms of spending for our schools. We could move all of it over to state funding. We'd have to increase somewhere, change some things around. But I actually think the voters probably better adept at trying to hold in terms of no more increases or huge increases. That unvoted piece on the property side, that, like Brian says, exactly it. That's what we've seen over the last 5 years. That's what spiked. We'll address that ideally on Wednesday with a couple different bills to prevent that moving forward and actually decrease bills for next year. But the voters, I think, are actually in a much better spot to hold the line and prevent a lot of these increases. I would not trust us in the legislature to try to prevent increases in spending at the school side. I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, Representative Thomas, though, my reply to that, though, Representative Thomas, is that we'd like the legislators to follow the Ohio Constitution, that they swore an oath to follow the Constitution. Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution says that the state is responsible for the funding of the schools. And there are also Article 1 of the Ohio Constitution demands that the legislators are supposed to protect the private property of the citizens of the state. And they're not doing that. When we have the mentality, especially in the Senate, that if we can't afford our property taxes, we got to sell our home and move into an apartment, I would dare say that I'm challenging that. And that is not acceptable type of mentality with our senators.
Yep.
Yeah,
Joe,
I think the problem we have is
in.
okay. 1 second, just 1 second. I think the problem we have is that we can't trust the government, and we can't trust the local government or the state government, and we're kind of stuck right in the middle. But I do know one thing: the local taxes have become they're not. It just doesn't work anymore. We just can't afford them. Okay, so the local property taxes are too high. So they've got to be slashed. They've got to be done away with. Something has to give here. That's where we're at, and that's the only option at this point. So something's got to get done. Go ahead.
So, Joe, I think it's unrealistic to expect anyone to be their own boss, to expect a local school district to cut its own budget, to right size, to create a revolutionary new way of doing things. And even a small bit of change is revolutionary in that context. It's not realistic. If we can't trust our state legislators, we need new state legislators. But you can't expect a school to be its own boss or to cut itself. For this kind of structural change, you need someone from the outside to say, one county, one school district, one principal per X number of students, a maximum of $20,000 spent per student, no matter what. To set rules like that for cost control, you need an outsider, because realistically, the school will never cut itself. And experience teaches us this. How many school boards have cut their spending, even in red Republican counties like Lake? Can you name one?
That's cut spending? No, you can't.
Yeah, Joe, let me respond to that. And I've said this, Auditor Galloway and I've had discussions on this for several years now, and that is the lack of checks and balances in our system. Auditor Galloway and through Representative Thomas, they've been trying to increase the capabilities of the County Budget Commission, made up of the auditor, prosecutor, and the treasurer, so that they have a chance to be what they should be, and that's the watchdog for the taxpayers. Maybe they can, tell us something about that, but it's going to take, county budget commissions to have a real spine to stand up to some of these school districts that are accumulating massive amounts of money. And the same thing with the other taxing authorities, and I've found that through Lake County. It's just not. They keep taking the money away from the citizens, and it needs to be in the hands of the citizens, not just sitting in an investment account.
Sorry, Brian, didn't mean to step on your toes, but there's a critical element of this that I don't want to overlook, and I want to make sure that it's put out onto the table and very visibly part of this conversation. When I bring up school funding and how much money goes into what we call education in Ohio, I'm very quickly and very often accused of not caring about the children. However, I happen to have a career in an area that tracks trends. I can see trends and I can point to them. And actually, I co-created the Ohio Academic Accountability Project. Go look up on Protect Ohio Children, the Ohio Academic Accountability Project, and I show people how to chart, how to actually visibly create a representation of what's happening in cost and in academics in your school district throughout Ohio. On average, we have an inverse relationship, which means effectively, the more money we spend, the dumber the kids end up being, which is infuriating. I do care about children and education. I care tremendously. And apparently, if we follow this trend line to its logical conclusion, if we double the amount of money we're spending, pretty soon these kids are going to be banging rocks together and grunting. It's terrible. We have a school system that is doing exactly the opposite of what it should be doing at preposterously more money per pupil that should be spent. It's wrong. It's broken. It needs to be fixed.
Well, that's what we're hoping. All right, great. So we do have the chat open now. So if you have any chats, bring them on. And we also I still have a lot of other questions that we'll never get to.
Joe, we hijacked your
let's see what's up. Put that back up a minute, Kent. Let's see what the chat is all about. So if you're in the chat, please chat. Okay, Mahoning County tax relief. Let's see what it says here. Never. They came back for more even after our houses were assessed 30% higher. They still came back for more. We don't trust them with our homes. We do not pledge our homes in perpetuity. Leave them alone. Okay, the problem we're getting to again, and we've talked about this over and over and over, is, and Here's my issue, and it's the same as a lot of people, is, okay, we're paying so much in property taxes, when are we going to get some relief? When you become a senior citizen, you turn 65, maybe you shouldn't be paying any more property taxes. How about a school system that takes 65% of my property taxes, but yet my kids never went there? Or my kids are gone, I'm in the house by myself with my wife or whatever, we don't have kids. Why am I now, for the rest of my life, paying all this property taxes? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So,
Joe,
let's get somebody in here. All right, go ahead.
That's a good comment.
Joe, I have to say, the bare minimum that can credibly be called property tax reform is to abolish property taxes for seniors, a 100% property tax exemption for our seniors. We have the mechanism to do it. We simply expand the homestead exemption so it gives 100% coverage. We know how to do it, and we know how much it costs. State Senator Al Catrona, who represents Mahoning County, proposed a 50% property tax exemption for seniors, and it was costed out at $1.5 billion. Doesn't take a mathematician to double that and say 100% would be a $3 billion cost to the state. That's less than 3% of the current state budget. So anytime your state rep or state senator says to you, I care about seniors, but they're not willing to support a 100% property tax exemption for our seniors, they care about you less than 3% of their budget.
All right, let's get Thomas in here. Dave, is that true? Is that true with the budget and everything? Would you agree with those numbers?
Our budget's actually about $50 billion a year, so it's a little bit different. But I think in terms of what we're currently spending, state tax dollars, what we pay in income tax and sales tax, that currently is subsidizing about $2 billion. And the idea is, are we just going to essentially continue to increase government, increase the actual total taxation and spending, or are we going to try to target in on less actual revenue coming in? So one of the things we did in the budget, for example, was to allow counties to double the homestead for those who are most impacted, most low-income seniors. We've seen about 5 or 6 counties already. We're expecting a good number more. That's doubling on average about $1,000 for a senior who really is kind of at the brink. But to get at the real question of the asker, 30% increases in value. That's what's happened over the last 5 years. That revenue then is coming into local entities. And the crux of it is that local entities did not have to take it. So we have the policies in place where a township, a county, a village, city, school can accept that unvoted increases, but they don't have to. Now, a lot of counties are actually decreasing their tax rates. They're rolling things back, some townships as well. But what we're going to have in terms of policy is actual forced changes to that, because whoever said it earlier is right. We can't rely on many local governments, unfortunately, to police themselves. We have to actually have those limits or just remove them entirely.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to throw this question from the chat here. Very good. To our Lake County auditor, and it says, "How can Ohio justify Ohio schools sitting on $10.5 billion in cash reserves?" That's what I've been told, that the public schools have in cash reserves over $10 billion. So if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, obviously, there's a couple of different things there. I mean, sound budgeting would call for, any government agency, schools or otherwise, to have some reserves. I can tell you every school district has to be able to make payroll and pay expenses in the first quarter of every year before they get their tax settlement. So, it's not a sense of just 10.5 billion that's just sort of out there. So there is a place for reserves. Now, I think what the question is really getting at is back to the earlier conversation about what's being spent and why, and how we can sort of rein in the cost of education as it's currently structured in Ohio. It's one of the reasons why, in looking at this problem and serving on the governor's work group, as I did, I proposed Ohio consolidate down to 94 school districts in part. That would be 88 counties and plus the 6 large urban districts for a total of 94. to begin sort of dealing with the overhead, administrative costs, transportation costs, building costs, all these things that are being incurred individually by school districts. It's costing taxpayers a lot of repetitive money that with modern technology isn't necessary. You have a state of Florida with double the population of Ohio sitting there with 73 school districts. So for me to suggest that we go from 611 down to 94, that immediately got me attacked by school superintendents in Northwest Ohio. They ran to the TV stations, and I had to do interviews explaining myself. But you have counties, as an example, in Northwest Ohio with 28 to 30,000 people in the entire county, not students, people, with 4 school districts, right? Lake County, as Brian knows, we have 9 school districts. I have 9 superintendents, countless assistant superintendents, a lot of sub-administrative jobs, things like, even down into minutia of things like payroll. We are spending a lot of money because the state of Ohio has become, in large part, a real slave to the concept of local control. And in 1915, the state had around 2,600 school districts. Now we're down to 611. I think we can start to reduce those costs and work on the cost of delivering the education while we're working on improving it. Now, I want to visit something that Jonathan had talked about, the quality of that education. And it's interesting to me that, I think we're sort of at this crossroads, right? Our schools have become the social net in our state, and not just Ohio, but in many states, right? You have kids coming to school, hungry. You have kids with certain mental illnesses. You have, lack of proper parental management. You have kids showing up for kindergarten not prepared for school. You have a lot of these issues that we are now trying to solve societal ills through our schools. And in doing so, we're spending a lot of money to do it. And in the same way, when the City of Cleveland Library District, provides free lunches every day to kids, right? Is that the role of a library, right?
100%.
We've sort of gone askew on mission, right? And it's costing us a lot of money. So there's a lot of things that need to happen in terms of dealing with the structural, the mission, the structure, and then ultimately the cost. And so, when somebody asks about reserves of schools, I think that's kind of what they're driving at, is kind of, to Jonathan's point, to Brian's point, and to David's point, like, what are we paying for, in terms of those tax dollars being 60 to 65% of my property tax bill. Education is what, David, 51% of the state budget now? I mean, one can't argue that we do not spend enough on education in Ohio. And so we need big changes. So when I look at this whole problem, I really took a look at it from a standpoint of, okay, what is the biggest portion of the tax bill? Schools. I have really come to believe that the ultimate solution in this thing is that the state is going to have to take over the lion's share of education funding. In order to get there, it's not an easy 1-2 step, but if you were to remove school levies from everybody's tax bill, okay, everybody would be looking at a 60 to 65% tax cut. I think that would make it a lot more manageable for folks, right? And that's asking a lot in terms of revenue having to be generated elsewhere, right? But I would say that when I look at Brian's constitutional amendment drive and I hear people talk about it, what I'm hearing from those voters is they are tired of paying for the entire school educational structure on their backs of their home taxes, right? I think at the end of the day, people that are signing that petition, I don't get a lot of people complaining about their fire levy. I don't get a lot of people that are worked up about their police levy. they only ever want to talk about school taxes. And, I think that that's what motivates people to want to sign Brian's petition. And I think that that's ultimately where the legislature is going to have to come to the grips with the fact that they're going to have to answer to DeRolf at some point. They're going to have to take over the majority share of educational funding, and they're going to have to figure out how to remove that off of people's property tax bills.
All right.
Hey, Joe. I
Wait,
chime in on
I'm
that.
going to move on. I'm going to move on to another question here.
But wait, there's such good stuff.
I know, but fill it in with the next question. I just want to get some other questions going here. All right. Question is, and I thought this was an interesting one because I hadn't thought of it before either. It says, I don't think that any existing bond levies can be abandoned if this were to be passed. Has anyone given that any thought? What happens to all these school or big bond levies? What happens with that? All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
This came up really quick. And I'm sorry, Dave, I'm about to hit a sore subject.
I was going to talk about it too.
This came up with the inside millage discussion that came out in terms of eliminating inside millage, because most of those bond levies are tied to inside millage. And what we learned was that from the bond folks, the bond bankers and the bond councils have told us everybody would immediately automatically be in default. Technically, because even if you could pay it, you've now eliminated the source that is the underlying guarantee. So in essence, the constitutional amendment as proposed would in theory do the same thing. That's going to need a big fix, right? How that would be done, because if you are defaulting on bonds, whether it's fire stations, schools, public infrastructure, bridges, you name it, you've just destroyed Ohio's credit rating. So that is a serious question that is going to have to be addressed if this were to come to pass.
David, do you have anything you want to add?
Chris is right. My original version of House Bill 335 would have eliminated all of the inside millage or the unvoted millage in the Ohio, about $3.5 billion worth of taxes. A lot of local entities, counties, schools, villages, townships use that for their actual bonded debt as backing. What we kind of dived into with that policy and with trying to eliminate, it's legal, it's possible, but those entities would have to then use other means. They would lose the backing and they would still be on the hook essentially. So kind of take that a step further. If in the Constitution, which right now, the Constitution has property taxation right there front and center. If that were to be eliminated, those entities would still actually be on the hook for it. It just would have to be funded through another means. But if you're, let's say a county, for example, you're funding your county jail through the inside millage piece, or if you're, the court case was Parma about 100 years ago. We decreased inside millage from 15 down to 10. They were funding one of their city halls through the inside millage aspect. Parma was still on the hook for that, but they couldn't actually pay it without increasing taxes somewhere else. So all these entities would still have to be paying those funds. But to Chris's point, credit ratings and costs for actual borrowing, we would be in quite a flux with that, but still have to make those payments.
Okay, gotcha. I got another question here. It says the bigger question is, with this increase in real estate taxes, where did all the extra money go that's been collected? Who wants to handle that one? I'm going to throw this over to you first.
Can you? I'm sorry. I was reading that that text. Could you read that one again, Joe?
Yeah, they want to know, Brian, since they've collected all this extra money without a vote. What is every institution doing with all this extra cash? That's what they want to know.
Well, I think Auditor Galloway's depend on the taxing authority. I mean, if you're looking at metro parks, I'm sure they're probably going to increase some pay, but they believe in buying up land and in improving the property, and people, seem to love, metro parks. But you've got your schools. They're adding more administration all the time. What did Willoughby Eastlake do with their $8.8 million without a vote of the taxpayers? And as Representative David Thomas said, the dirty little secret is they don't have to accept the money. I don't know of any taxing authority in Ohio or in Lake County anyway. I think there was one in Geauga. A school did not accept about $1 million in additional property taxes, but for the most part.
Wait, you found one school? You found one school?
In West Geauga. Yeah, West Geauga, their county budget commission has a different approach than Lake County, and their auditor did go to the schools, and I can't remember which school district it was, but they decided, I think it was about $1 million, they did not accept. They let the taxpayers keep that. But that doesn't happen in Lake County, to the best of my knowledge. Auditor Galley would be better able.
Yeah, I didn't think that happened in reality, period, let alone...
It's actually happening quite a bit across the state. We're seeing almost, I think, 11 or 12 counties now decreasing their tax rates in preparation for next year. We're seeing a lot of townships and villages actually decreasing their tax rates too. And that goes back to the whole concept. Values go up. We right now have a tax policy where there's a portion of your tax bill that goes up with those values, but nothing is actually forced upon local entities to accept those. So any entity with inside millage or a school with a 20 mil floor, they can actually decrease the tax rate. But it goes back to what incentive is there? There really isn't. And so that's why a budget commission, and that's why changes in state policy to really force them to either not accept it or severely cap it moving forward. That's why the $10.5 billion with the schools, a lot of that money is because of the much higher property taxes. And if that money is just sitting there in the bank accounts, it really shouldn't be. It should either be used properly or lowered in terms of decreasing tax rates moving forward.
Right, Joe, to look at where this problem really came from, I think we saw an acceleration of it during Governor John Kasich, but it starts earlier than that. In 1934, the state sales tax was adopted to pay for public schools, to fund local government, and to relieve poverty. When we adopted the income tax decades later, same purposes. But more and more of the money ultimately has stayed in Columbus. Governor Kasich accelerated that trend, but it's a trend that's been going on for a long time. And so with local entities getting less and less from their local government fund, what are they going to do? They're going to rely more and more heavily on property taxes. And so by withholding the sales and income tax at the state level that were meant for local government and funding of schools, and the Constitution says state government's supposed to fund public schools, it ultimately created a massive incentive for local government to abuse property taxes, and that's how we got here.
Well, that's how we got here, but we got to find a way out. Okay, a couple more of these, and then we'll get off of this. But this question, if anybody wants to answer it real fast, I don't know if it has a lot of merit, but it says Tennessee has 7 million people, Ohio 11 million. Tennessee has a sales tax between 7 and 9%, depending on the community you live in. Tennessee can fund their schools and their local governments. Every citizen and visitor pays a sales tax. Apparently, the point they're trying to make is that the schools are being funded through a sales tax in Tennessee. I don't know if that's true, because I thought every state pays property tax. I didn't think there was any of the 50 that funded without the property taxes. Does anybody want to say anything on that topic?
Tennessee does have a property tax. What they don't have is an income tax. So they're paying for their governance with sales tax and income tax, and don't forget other types of fees, right? There are states to renew your license or your registration for your car might cost you, $1,000, where Ohio it's $60. So other states do it in different ways. I have family in New Hampshire. There's no income tax. There's no sales tax. They rely heavily on property tax. And other state fees like auto registration and other things. So there is no state that doesn't currently not levy local property taxes.
All right, I'm going to ask this. Okay, go ahead.
I was going to ask about, we talked about school, funding. What we haven't also talked about was the pensions for the teachers. I understand that those pension funds are severely underfunded. Again, is that a problem, Representative Thomas? Is that a real problem for us? How do we fund those retirement systems for school teachers and administrators and that sort of thing?
Yeah, pensions are a very, very sticky wicket. So one of the things we had to do in the budget was actually, essentially, you've had the foxes guarding the hen house with STRS and with the teachers' pensions. Huge issues over the last 5 years. It's truly been a dumpster fire, and we had to change essentially the governance structure of STRS just to try to stabilize them moving forward. You have, frankly, a much higher amount of payouts. You've got less folks coming in that are actually paying in. And so, just like PRS, just like police and fire, and frankly, Social Security at the national level, you're having an outbalance of money paid out versus the actual contributions in. So we're kind of looking at what's the solvency, what's that look like. We're first taking our stance on police and fire, that pension, and then we'll move over to STRS after.
What I've also heard, Representative Thomas, is and what I'm seeing in Lake County, especially it happened in my school district, Riverside School District, where we are now, paying these administrators the pickup, and that is the employees portion of the retirement, which I believe is 10%. I believe that's paid as additional compensation, for them. So not only are they getting their annual compensation, but we're paying for the retirement benefits. And when I go down the list of all of the employee benefits, that doesn't happen in the private sector, and I think that's compounding the problem with what's happening with property taxes. So this
is the public pension pickup. Yep, public pension pickup. It's not just for schools, though. It's actually administrators at your local level, your county level, schools as well. And something that if you tune in to the pension committee at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, you'll see Auditor Galloway testifying in support of my House Bill 473, which bans the public pension pickup. It's really a transparency thing. I think I actually was told by a school board member, Dave, if we had the true salary of what they're making without this pension pickup public, our taxpayers would never be able to support that. And I think that's the whole idea, is that they're trying to hide what the compensation with taxpayers are actually paying, not just for superintendents and treasurers, but a whole host of folks across the public sphere.
I just want to follow up by saying, I've said it before, I'll say it again, in public schools and in government in general, if you fired half the administrators and you paid the other half as much, you'd still have too many overpaid administrators.
Well, I'll do you one better than that. What if you just shut down the federal government altogether? Would anybody even notice? No, you don't. All right. I've got, I want to just, Chris, I want to just get a little information from you. I don't want to hold you up here all night, and it's been excellent. Thank you for coming on and everything. You were on that committee that Governor DeWine put together. Can you tell us exactly what you accomplished on that committee? It's not a trick question. Maybe you could fill us in.
Well, after the governor vetoed a number of provisions that were in the budget, things that Dave worked so hard to put in, I immediately sent out a press release criticizing him for doing so, because those were the first steps to property tax reform. And Joe, he got his revenge on me by putting me on his work group. So that's the lesson, don't step out and, give the government grief, because he knows how to return fire. This is how the committee, you had a diverse group of public officials from a lot of different backgrounds within the public sphere, including some retired folks, former legislator and Bill Seitz, former Congressman Pat Teaberry, who chairs the Ohio Business Roundtable, a couple of superintendents, 2 county auditors, myself and Matt Nolan from Warren County, a county treasurer, and a few county commissioners. And basically, the governor tasked us with reviewing stuff that was in the budget, making recommendations, as well as making other additional recommendations on things that we should be doing to reform property tax in Ohio. And he gave us 60 days to basically do this. We met in person and over Zoom repeatedly in those 60 days, and we came out with a number of recommendations, some of which had already been worked on by the legislature, and we affirmed those. Things like the Budget Commission reform that the governor vetoed. His own work group said, well, here's 2 minor tweaks, and we support it. And so Dave went ahead and put that in the legislation, and they passed it out of committee, and they passed it out of the House, and it's going to the Senate, and that will be House Bill 309. We looked at a wide range of items, all of which are perfectly good on their own. I was happy that they listened to a lot of my recommendations. I mean, I recommended that the board of commissioners in each county have the final say in placing ballots from county agencies that have unelected boards on them. Currently under law, the word is shall. So if an Adams board or Park District or somebody gives that to the commissioners, they are required to put it on the ballot for a vote. And again, this is just one example of the kind of thing where the recommendation is, hey, this, an Adams board, let's say, votes on a levy. It should go to the Budget Commissioner for review, and that recommendation should go to the Board of Commissioners, and then the Board of Commissioners will decide whether it goes on the ballot, right? Creating an additional layer of checklists, if you will, of checks and balances. Now, you can read the report. It's online. There's some good recommendations in there. The legislature is picking up some of them. I will tell you from my perspective, and again, I voiced this right from the go in our very first meeting, is that I view this problem in property taxes twofold. We have our immediate crisis of things like the 20 mil floor calculations and the crazy housing market, spiking valuations, and all that dealing. We have an immediate property tax crisis, okay? And a lot of the things that we're doing and the legislature is proposing and Dave is working so hard on are sort of dealing in that short-term component. But I also think that there has to be a long-term component to this thing. The structuring and restructuring of government at every level, at the local level, the county level, and the state level, improving efficiencies, reducing redundancies. Ohio is like number 2 in the country in the number of taxing authorities that we have in our state. It's over like 2,400. I think it makes us like the 2nd or 3rd worst state in the country with the number of agencies and authorities that can levy a property tax on folks. Those are the kind of long-term structural reforms that we have to do. Now, I kept pounding the desk that I wanted the committee to work on some of those things, and there really wasn't much of an appetite for that. The recommendations that we put forward are really just sort of dealing with the current crisis. And the analogy I gave in the meeting was, hey, I'm the state of Ohio. I'm fat, all right? I need to lose weight. And everything we're doing right now, what Dave is doing, it's perfectly valid, but it's the Ozempic model. We're going to jam ourselves with that needle. We're going to try to lose 15 to 30 real quick to try to solve the crisis, the immediate health crisis of being overweight. But everybody on this Zoom, when everybody watching at home knows that if you want to get healthy and you want to lose weight long term, you got to change your eating habits. You got to change your lifestyle. You got to start exercising. You got to start doing all these structural things in order to keep it off, to lose it and keep it off. And I think that's the part of the conversation that's to this point has been lacking at all levels. We're all sort of dealing with the immediate crisis, and I understand that's human nature. But to the point of some folks from earlier in this conversation, we do need to start looking at the big picture, long-term, the structural. How are we funding our schools? How are we dealing with redundancy in government structure and taxation, across the state? Why do we have so many taxing authorities? Are there villages that don't need to exist anymore? Are there ways that we could be more efficient? We have to start having these conversations. Because to John Pleshnik's point, we have a spending problem.
Right. Yeah, we have a spending problem, and we also have a problem of too much talking amongst that goes on for decades too. And nobody really seems to want to solve the issue except talk about it. And at this point, the taxpayers, they're not willing to listen to any more talk. I think that's why this whole property tax, abandon the property tax, is taking some steps forward. Go ahead.
I want to start by commending my colleague Auditor Galloway on being the boldest, quite easily the boldest member of the governor's working group. I think that the proposals that he discussed about combining school districts and taking all school taxes out of property tax bills are the kind of bold discussions we need to be having statewide. Unfortunately, if you look at the report that was actually issued, proposals 1 through 19 talk about procedural safeguards. They talk about transparency. They talk about limiting future increases in taxes, but they don't cut taxes. And the very final proposal, number 20, discusses the possibility of maybe someday considering lowering property taxes for the desperately poor and for seniors. Certainly, most of us agree with that, but these are the tiniest nibbles around the issue, the most non-controversial suggestions, rather than the kind of bold action that Auditor Galloway has talked about, and that we really need, because people are tired of the talking. We had the state legislature's property tax committee talk for over a year. They produced a big, long report of conflicting ideas. The governor now has issued his report, and here we are with no major property tax reform passed. Ultimately, meaningful property tax reform means your property tax bill is lower than when this nonsense started, not higher. And it's not enough to say we're going to be more transparent, we're going to have a new committee, or the budget commission will have new powers, we'll do better in the future. People expect a property tax cut today, and they expect a cut that is big enough that it actually takes them into the positive territory, that they're paying less taxes than when this started. And that's going to require major reform. Now, if that doesn't happen, I think we know where this train is going. Brian, what's going to happen to property taxes November of 2026?
They are going to be on the ballot, and people are going to abolish property taxes, and effective January 1st of 2027, there'll be no more property taxes collected in the state of Ohio. Auditor Galloway and I had, conversation many, it may have been a couple of years now ago, but this whole movement started when our local representatives would not talk to us. Leonard Gilbert, John Marr, and myself tried to reach out to Senator Serino, Representative Callender, Representative Troy. They wouldn't talk to us. We went down to the state capitol, tried to voice our feelings about the property taxes. No one would listen to us. Representative Brian Stewart was the only one that allowed us to meet in his office when I told him that we'd like to abolish the property taxes. He said that's a little too big, for him to take a bite on if we had something smaller. But we decided that we need to starve the beast when we found out that our state legislators, senators, and representatives did not care about the seniors, and they would not abolish the property taxes for seniors because they didn't want to carve out anything for seniors. So, as Commissioner Plechnik says, it's pretty small, $3 billion. But when we found out that our legislators didn't care about our seniors, we said then we must starve the beast. We're going to take it all down. Auditor Galloway asked me if there's, if we could solve the school funding, would we take our initiative? Would we stop it? And we said no. It's too far gone now. We have talked to many, many people throughout the state, and people want their freedom and liberty back. They want to save it for future generations. This is more than a dollar and cent issue. And I appreciate Auditor Galloway and Representative David Thomas for what they're doing. They are two leaders in the state, and we will try to support them as much as we can, but we're being honest. People, the average citizens, are telling us they want it all gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, I'm going to thank you again for coming on tonight. I don't want to hold you up all night, and but we do appreciate you. And I know that you were even talking about coming on. We have a town hall on Tuesday night that we're doing in Cleveland, hoping get a good crowd there and everything like that. I know that you originally scheduled for that. Appreciate it, but I know you got work to do in Columbus.
We have to go to Columbus to try to work on all this stuff. So, but I look forward to continuing the conversation with everybody as we try to. To try to work on these things. I appreciate the platform. I've looked at this like I told somebody yesterday. I said, guys like Dave Thomas and I are we're the reformers in the Roman Senate, if you will. We're inside the walls, and Brian is the barbarian at the gate. and if we fail, right? If reformers like Dave Thomas or the things that the Auditors Association wants to get done, if we fail, then to Brian's point, there will be a big vote on this next year.
You got it. So, and he is a mountain lion, that Brian Massey. You got to watch him. Thanks again, Chris. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you very much. And we'll have you on again. We got to keep the conversation going. Dave Thomas, same with you. I do want to hear, though, if you want to just summarize some of your property tax bills and legislation, kind of quickly here as to what you're working on, that'd be awesome.
So real quick, we are definitely behind. No one could challenge that. The legislature has not taken actions. We've not passed actual property tax bills that help regular citizens in decades. The biggest reason for that is, of course, property taxes are a local tax. That money stays at the local level. It's the highest tax Ohioans pay, but we, the state, don't actually receive any of that money. And so we've largely left property taxes to the local level to be able to decide how best to do it and what that revenue looks like. Obviously, things have gotten out of hand. So to summarize all of our bills, our whole effort, essentially, as Chris said, phase one is responding to what happened over the last 5 years. That's eliminating or capping unvoted increases. That's limiting down when homeowners don't have a say over what their actual tax bill looks like. It's essentially trying to force local entities to admit that they are raising taxes when they accept unvoted increases on the property side. And then it's giving a lot more of that kind of control to the voter. All of those, had we passed House Bill 186, which is about a $1.7 billion property tax cut and limit to school funding moving forward. Had we passed that 5 years ago, had we passed House Bill 129, which lifts 237 schools off the 20 mil floor 5 years ago, had we passed House Bill 335, which caps and limits the inside millage, unvoted growth to local governments moving forward 5 years ago, and then House Bill 309, the Budget Commission. Those are 4 bills we're passing this month. Should have happened a long time ago. It's taken way too long this year, but we've done more in 10 months than the legislature has done in, as I said, about 20, 30 years. So those are just the bills already that we've gotten through, that we're doing. A lot more coming as well, but essentially responding to the last 5 years, preventing that from moving forward, decreasing most bills. And then phase two has to be the spending side. If we eliminate all property taxes but don't actually decrease spending, you're just shifting it right over somewhere else, and growing government. So phase two, we're working on as well, but we have to actually change the tax policy now to prevent our local governments from continuing to raise and have property taxes spike with that revenue. A lot more coming.
I got a question for you, and that is, if the property taxes are abolished, the one thing that I fear is that the city income tax is just going to explode, which I say cannot happen because we are not accomplishing anything then, I don't think, because what's your thoughts on that? Do you see that as happening if we abolish property taxes?
To Chris's point earlier, property taxes are $24 billion. Let's even say we can get rid of, waste, get rid of duplication. Let's bring them down to $16 billion as an example. That's still more than what we bring in sales tax and income tax at the state side. So you are going to have to move that revenue somewhere. Now, folks, I agree, there's more fair ways to do it than the property side, income or sales. But I do not envision the state, and philosophically, we as Republicans don't really want to do this either. We shouldn't be increasing taxes at the state level, sending all the money down to Columbus, and then dispersing it from one large central government to all of our locals. I envision us essentially allowing, to your point, cities to then control what's their income tax, how much revenue they really need, counties on the sales tax, schools probably on income tax as well. That's going to be all likely done local entity by local entity.
Brian, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, interesting that when we initially proposed this, people were saying, well, how are you going to replace the money? But the legislators are talking about eliminating the income tax. But no one ever asked the legislators, well, how are you going to replace the money that you're not getting from the income tax? So that's interesting to me. But the other thing is, at the local level, we're saying that we still want to pay for police and fire, roads and bridges at the local level, but just do not tie it to my home. I want more transparency. I want to know, rather than saying that I'm going to pay, $2,100 to Concord Township, I want to know exactly how much I'm paying for police, for fire, because I want to know, are they being good stewards of the taxpayers' money? Because I'm going to compare those numbers to what other municipalities are charging for the same services. There has to be more transparency in governance. That is one of the keys. Honesty, integrity, and transparency are keys to good governance.
Yep. Okay, quick question to you guys. What happens if you don't pay that city income tax, which is just going to go up crazily? What then? What's the repercussions? Anybody?
So if you don't pay, income tax now, or if you don't pay your sales tax now, that is a criminal offense. You can either have your wages garnished, you could have a lien placed on your property, for example. I tell folks, what's the two guaranteed things in life? It's death and taxes. And so those services, to Brian's point, folks want to pay them, they're going to be paid some way. But those who don't pay or can't pay, just like currently, there are ways where essentially there is a forced payment through the income side or the sales side if we don't have the property.
All right. So to me, you're not solving anything, because if they're going to throw me in jail because I don't pay that enormous city income tax, what's the difference? They're going to take my house, throw me in jail. Have we thought this through well enough, guys? I mean, I don't like the idea of money going to. I don't like the idea of money going to pay for the city income tax like that, because that to me is going to be the same thing as property tax. It's going to hurt me. You want to say anything, Leonard? No?
Now, the problem, Joe, again, the problem has to be, you got to change the narrative here. What we're saying is if you don't do anything, it will continue to go up. But what we're saying is that it has to be coupled with changes in our behavior. So if we don't address that, you will get an increase, but that number should be coming down, not going up.
Anybody else want to chime in? Commish?
Joe, as taxpayers, we need to start keeping score. This is 2025, and today there's been no meaningful property tax reform. What we've seen the state legislature vote for is to cut the personal property tax that power plants pay. They've allocated $600 million, a gift to the Cleveland Browns Stadium. They voted for those things, but they have not voted to give any meaningful property tax reform. We've already discussed how it costs less than 3% of the state budget to give a 100% property tax exemption for seniors. And it's not true that the state doesn't get your property taxes. We all know that over 60% of property taxes go to public schools. And we all know that Article 6, Section 2 of the Ohio Constitution makes that the state's responsibility. So more than half of our property taxes are going to the state and the schools that they control. To say there's local control over schools is a joke. If your school board decides to vote against the Ohio Revised Code, they might end up in prison, but it certainly isn't the case that they have control. Ultimately, the state legislature governs our public schools in every meaningful respect. They're responsible for funding them under the state constitution, and they're collecting more than half of our property taxes. So the solution has to come from the state, and it's got to be paid for by the state. I want to close by saying this. Anytime someone says that a tax cut is somehow subsidizing taxpayers misses the point. It's not state dollars. They're your dollars. It's your money.
All right. Very good. All right, Dave, just give you the last word tonight. Hey, I appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate it. You're one of those guys we can count on to get some answers, and you're doing the best of anybody in the legislature with these property taxes. I see your name in the newspaper all the time, even though I don't read the newspaper, but I see it. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I just would say thank you guys for continuing to get the information out there. There's so much happening, and there are so many different layers and aspects to this, and we've avoided this for so long that we are playing catch up. I'll be the first one to admit that. So what folks are seeing now is just us trying to shore up all of our essentially loose ends of horrible policy that we still have. And I would just essentially back up, traveling the state right now, talking with counties, villages, schools. Local entities are the creative answer to a lot of this because they're the ultimate holder of the services that we want: police, fire, all these different things at the local level. And we're seeing a lot of good things happening where entities are diversifying their revenue, where entities are doing shared services. It's just not happening enough to actually make an impact across the state. You're going to see us try to force some of this, and you're going to see a lot of pushback because people don't like the state coming in telling people what to do. But if that ultimately helps to save taxpayers, and if we're able to get some of that done, I think it's for the best. So a lot more to come, but I want to say sorry on behalf of the legislature. It's just 10 months in, but on behalf of legislatures prior, for Columbus not doing the forceful changes needed at the local level for this tax policy. We are going to do better, and we're doing better now.
Well, thank you again. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Yeah, thank you very much for all of that. And, I'll give you, Brian, you have any parting words of wisdom for us tonight? Did we accomplish anything on this show tonight? Did we?
Yeah, I think the civil discourse is extremely important, and I appreciate Representative David Thomas and Auditor Galloway, and we'll continue to discuss things with them. And Commissioner Plechnik has been instrumental in getting the message across to the citizens of Ohio and to the legislators that we mean business with this constitutional amendment. We're not backing down, and we're going to try our best. We're asking our citizens to keep collecting signatures, keep getting more circulators. We're getting more circulators all the time, and we think the people should have a right to vote November 2026 on whether or not to abolish the property taxes. And maybe our senators then will step up and say, gee, maybe we should have listened to the people when we had the chance.
It's a novel concept, listening to the people. I'll give you the last word tonight, John. Thank you as always, and we will see you Tuesday at that town hall event.
So, Joe, my last words are these three: we the people. Because politicians will talk and talk and talk and talk, but only we, the people, are going to be able to change things. And we're going to do that by signing the petition to abolish property taxes, because number one, that puts the pressure on the state to do their job. And number two, it gives us the opportunity as individual taxpayers to take our own future into our own hands and have the vote to abolish property taxes November 2026.
You got it. Amen. All right, you guys take care. Thank you again.
Thanks
God
a lot,
bless.
Joe.
See you. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, Leonard.